Hi and welcome back. And we are down to two last session. We will continue with the keynote closing and followed by a creative session at the end of Be Inevitable 2020. So the keynote closing is going to be very interesting because normally because of the pandemic which hit the world globally, many businesses are badly affected. And so we are told to think about what you can do. What can you do to reskill yourself? What do you need to learn to discover your talents? So this keynote closing has to do with this. So the closing speaker is someone who has won numerous awards. He has won a Global HR Award and Malaysia HR Leader Award. He will be telling us why is it crucial to reskill when resources are tight and businesses are currently in survival mode. But how to survive, not just survive, but survive well. So that is very important. So let's welcome Roshan Thiran, who is the founder and the CEO of Leaderonomics, a leading cost-driven leadership development firm in Asia Pacific.
Very good. Thank you so much. And I was asked to talk a little bit about reskilling, and just quick background on myself. I worked with a company called General Electric for many years in 9 different roles, and then I moved on to Johnson and Johnson, and then ultimately I the price called Leaderonomics. And one of my toughest roles was actually when I came back to Malaysia. So I spent my first 6 roles in GE, out in mostly in the US and a small role in Europe, where I was doing some integration work. But I came back to a business that I didn't understand, aviation. I was in financial services, I was in TV, and a whole bunch of other things. And interestingly, when I came back to Malaysia to take over a site, what I found was a rundown, really badly run aviation shop. And we used to overhaul engines. So this was really probably the worst shop in the world. Very low productivity, losing a lot of money, seemed to be unmotivated in terms of a workforce. And I really struggled, and I was trying to figure out how do we turn this ship around. And for 6 months, I struggled, and struggled, and I just couldn't do whatever I tried, didn't seem to work. And finally, I said, look, I think the answer is to do with what we're going to talk about today. It's really how do we enable people to change? How do we enable people to be successful and to be able to do their best? And there was a number of things that we did, but essentially we started to hone in on these things. How do we enable our people to be agile and to be able to shift? And when we did that, about a year and a half later, we became the #1 overhaul shop in the world. Right? I mean, here in Subang, the #1 overhaul shop, in terms of productivity, in terms of everything. And today, 20 years later, this shop is still one of the most best performing shops in the world. And that story, always resonated with me that it's not impossible to take something that is really worse in class and be able to transform that to be the best, not just in the country, but in the world. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But I think the when we started, there was the MC sort of said, look, there's a lot of changes that are happening. We are living in turbulent times. And when we talk about revolutions, right? People talk about the Industrial Revolution 1, 2, 3. But if you look at Industrial Revolution number 4, it's actually not one revolution. It's actually 3 revolutions in one. There's a physical revolution because we talk about autonomous vehicles, robotics, 3D printing, and all these things, right? That's physical. That's happening. That's one big revolution. The Internet of Things is enabling machines to talk to machines and move physical stuff. That's the physical revolution. Then there's a biological revolution where you talk about things like the genome mapping project, a predictive medicine where it's not just preventive, it's now predictive, right? Be able to give you the medicine based on something we think you will have in the future. And of course, we all talk about the digital, the IoT, blockchain, and all the disruptive business models and so many other things that is happening in the digital realm, right? And if you zoom in on the digital realm itself, right, we then have COVID, right? In the last couple of months, you have work from home, how do you engage employees, all these operational challenges that we have now, and we have business concerns, right, with cash flow and all these other things, and don't forget the security, right? That remains a big problem around the world, right? And worse with the digital hacking and all the other things that's happening. And then when you look at businesses, right? Typically, when you look at a typical business, right, a business will launch itself, it'll grow, it'll start to scale itself up. But at some point in time, we will say, okay, this is a good time to transform. Now, most businesses will not transform then. They will wait until there's a decline and then have a crisis, and that's where they will do the transformation. So typically transformation projects are around here. But the best time to transform is here, right? We know that. But because of COVID, right, suddenly I'm a growing business. Boom, I'm in crisis. I just launched my business. Boom, I'm in crisis. I'm scaling, things are going well. I'm about to hit this peak. Boom, I'm crisis, right? Every business is becoming a crisis business. And what does it mean? It means, right, that you need to transform. It means that you need to pivot. It means that you need to find a new way to get yourself back on the curve, right? If not, what's going to happen is if you don't get yourself down the curve, you will end up being a zombie, or you will die, right? And that's typically the big problem that's happening across organization. But it's also happening individually, because if you start looking at individuals, right, the same process works for us. When we start a new job, right? When we start a new job, we struggle a bit when we first get a job. So we learn, and it takes a lot of time for us to achieve some sort of result. Okay, so we take a long time to achieve this small result. But suddenly there's this exponential growth where a little bit of time, but we make so much progress. We make this kind of growth. We make this kind of growth in such little time, right? And then over time, we start to plateau. And over time, just like a business, we start to be not so good. But he said, no, I'm always, I always perform at this level. The last 10 years, I've been selling at 20, 30 units, and I've been doing that very well, and I'm really good, right? But here's what's really happening, right? Here's what's happening. We sort of, reach a point and we plateau. But why we say we plateau is because we're looking at it at an organizational level. And let me explain this, right? So let's say you year one, right? People, your KPI, is set for you. Okay, so we want you to perform at this level. And initially the first 6 months you struggle, but somehow you manage. At the end of the year, you just make it. Wow, I did a good job. And year two, you perform even better. Year three, even better. Year four, even better. Year five, wow, even better, and so on and so forth, right? Now, and you're saying, look, my company says I need to sell 10, but I sold 12 in year two. I sold 14, I sold 16, and then 17, and then 18, and 18, and sort of, I sort of plateaued, right, around 18, right? But the problem is this, it's not so much that you are improving. The problem is that the company raises the bar. This year, I want you to sell 12. Next year, it was 14. So you just made it. The following year, I want you to sell 16. Okay, fine. You also sold 16. But then I wanted you to sell 18, and you only sold 16. And I wanted you to sell 20, and you're selling 18. And so on and so forth. So the company is looking at you and saying, last time you were really good. You were performing quite well. And then suddenly you're not so performing. But you are saying, look, I'm selling 20, and they're saying I'm not performing. Last time I was selling only 16, and they said I perform well. The problem is that the company's expectation keeps changing. And why does the company's expectation keep changing? Because the world keeps changing. Because there is constant transformation that's happening. And that's the reason why we want to talk about reskilling. Because when we talk about reskilling, it's this. It's at some point in time, I need to take another curve. Another curve. Now, the crisis, one of the good things about a crisis is that it enables you to grow even faster. Because of the crisis, the curves become even higher because you learn even more. You're forced to do more. You're forced to be more agile. You're forced to change. You're forced to do things differently. And many of us, when we say, I'm never going to do online learning, or I'm never going to do online work, I'm never going to do all these things. But suddenly, because of the crisis, we were forced to. We were forced to learn tools. We were forced to do things differently. And that's really the extent of how a crisis can drive us. But the goal is this, that we need to keep, whenever we reach a plateau, we need to find a way to change. And when we change, remember the first part of change is struggle. We will struggle, we'll hate it, and then we will start to grow. And we'll struggle, we'll hate it, and then we'll start to grow. We will struggle, we'll hate it, and then we'll start to grow. And that's the reality of what we are and what we need to be. And so because of that, right, and we can come to this key conclusion, is that the world keeps changing. And so we also need to keep changing. We also need to keep transforming. We also need to keep reskilling. We also need to keep relearning, right? So that's something that we must understand. It's not because, they're forcing me to do this. They're not. It's unfortunate that the world has changed and expectation is changing. I hear something from the studio. If there's a question, do let us know from the studio. But I'll continue, right? So the world keeps changing. We need to keep transforming. We need to keep reskilling. We need to keep relearning. Right? Now, what does that mean in terms of, for me? I mean, what does that mean in terms of, how do I do this, right? So I wanna first tell you that it's actually a very painful process, right? And why is it painful? Because most people actually we don't like change. We say we like change. To us, I love change. But the reality is we shop at the same place, we park at the same place, and we drive to work the same way. We kind of love status quo. And many times we fear things that change because there's a risk, and we have this mindset that we want to play not to lose. It's safer not to lose than to play to win, because when you play to win, sometimes when you take risks, sometimes you lose, and you don't want that embarrassment, or you don't want that pain of losing, right? And so you play not to lose, which is a very defensive. Let's keep status quo, let's fight to preserve what we know, right? And that's one of the reasons why we don't like change. And Mark Twain, I think, said this, right? The only person who likes change is a wet baby. So we must understand that we don't like change, right? And so change is going to be hard work. That when we talk about reskilling, when we talk about relearning, when we talk about upgrading ourselves, it's going to be painful. And we need to sometimes block our mind, which says, no, stop it, don't bother. Everything will go back to normal in next year, 2021, everything will go back to normal. When we have that, we need to block it and say, no, it's not. Let's fight on, let's learn something new, let's push ahead, right? And that happens, right? So what does this all mean to me, right? And I think it's two things, right? Really, one is we need to learn, right? But we also need to unlearn the things that we may have learned, and we have beliefs. We have certain beliefs that say, "Oh no, this is the way things are," but those beliefs we need to eradicate. So when we learn new things, we need to eradicate old things, and we need to change, and we need to transform, or what we call reskill sometimes, right? So that's one piece. And I like this quote by Alvin Toffler. It says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Right. So that to me is a powerful quote, because it's not about reading and writing alone, right? It's about learning, unlearning, and relearning, right? And we sometimes call this reskilling. So what do we need to be reskilled on, right? Now the second part is, so first thing is we must learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? Unlearn, learn, unlearn, and change, right? Or relearn, as Alvin Toffler would say. The second part is going to be hard work, right? If you look at this, and this is a saying we always say in our office, right? Transformation is not natural. Reskilling is not natural. Change is not natural. Learning is not natural. We generally don't like any of these things. We have to work at it, and we have to work together, right? It's a community that builds a leader, right? So we have to work together, right? And it's hard work. We need to take the lead. We cannot depend on other people. We cannot depend on a company. We cannot depend on an organization. Say, okay, you send me for classes. I'll figure this out together. No, we need to take the lead. We need to own our own change, our own reskilling, right? And so I always say this: change has a considerable psychological impact on the human mind. To the fearful, right, it's threatening. To the hopeful, it's encouraging. To the confident, right, be confident, it's inspiring, because challenges, right? And if you look at this, when you start learning something new, right, initially it's very painful. Like when you learn how to ride a bicycle, initially you fall down, but as time goes, the confidence comes, and you get inspired, and you have that wind blowing, and you feel excited, and wow, this is amazing, and the experience is joyful, right? But that comes at the later part. The hard work is getting the fundamentals when you reskill yourself, and it's very painful, right? And so that's one important thing. Now I want to, the main part of it, and I think about 10 minutes or so, to wrap this up. What new skills do I need to have to thrive? So we talked about, the initial part is why we need to reskill ourselves, right? And we need to reskill ourselves because the world is changing. We have no choice, right? If not, we will end up being zombies, where our companies may end up being zombies, or worse, die, right? And be bankrupt. We then lose our jobs, and we want then, so that's one. The other piece is the world is changing at this pace. We need to keep up with that pace, which means we need to keep learning, we need to keep growing, we need to be agile. Now the second part is, it's going to be very painful. Change is going to be very painful. We will hate it. We will find excuses not to do it. We will find ways to avoid it. We will find a way to say, give excuses to ourselves. No, I'm not going to study this, I'm not going to learn this, I'm not going to pay attention to this. But you need to push yourself and say, no, cut all those things out. Just like a marathon runner, when he's running at the 30th 40th 30, 33, 34 kilometers, right? The legs will tell them, the body, the mind will say, stop it. It's too painful. You're gonna die. You're gonna hurt yourself. Stop it, stop it, stop it. And the marathon runner learns, they call it the wall, right? He learns how to ignore the mind and just keep progressing, even though there's so much pain in the body. And then finally, when they see the line, oh, 1 kilometer away, I see that line, then they feel confident. And then when they hit the line, right, all the pain disappears, right? Because it was just something that the mind made to stop us from pushing forward because they're worried of pain, they're worried of getting you hurt. And the mind's job is to protect you, right? And the mind keeps saying, stop it. But this is where you need to push ahead. You need to cut off and say, I need to keep learning these skills. So what new skills do we need in this new era? And I'm just going to go through a couple, right? And there's about 6 skills that I feel that are absolutely important, right? And it's because you think about robotics and you think about what the robots can do. A robot can do a lot of, and then you think about what AI can do, and artificial intelligence and all the other new digital things, tools, right? They can do a lot of stuff, but they cannot be mindful and empathetic. Human emotions is something only human beings have, right? And that's one skill that we need to learn how to really take that to the next level. How do we really understand how to be mindful and to be empathetic, right? Now, the other piece that only humans can do is human centricity. How do we create experiences, journey, and engagement with each other and enable that to be baked in as part of what we do and what the skills that we have to be able to connect, to be able to bond, to be able to establish trust, right? And those are things that only humans can do. I mean, that's very hard for machines to do. Now, the next part is what we call collaboration. How do we work in partnerships? And those are skills, right? To be able to influence, to be able to get partners together, to be able to allow collaborative efforts to happen, right? So those are skills that we need to have. Now, the other skills is digital adaptability, to be able to use the tools, to be able to harness digital, to be able to harness the services that are around us, and to build an ecosystem that we need to be successful in life and to be successful in our jobs, right? And I share those 4, but I want to go deeper in the last 2. And I call these 2 very important skills. And I think many of us in Malaysia don't really have these skills. And the first skill is what we call hyper awareness. Are we aware of all the dots there are? Because if we're not aware of the dots, we don't know what to learn. We don't know what to change. You see, the world is changing, and these are some skills that you can have. But what hyper awareness allows us to do is to understand what is the situation in front of us, and then figure out what skills do I need to have so that I can do the next piece, which is to value create, which is to continuously improve, which is to provide a value proposition for your organization, for yourself, to be able to scale up, right? So you see, if you don't know what skills are needed, you won't be able to learn the right thing to be able to get here. So you need to learn the right things to get to this point. You cannot create value if you don't know if the value is in a certain piece. You need to have the skills to be able to execute that piece. But if you don't know that that is the piece where the value is, then you are not able to do that. So let me just walk you through these 2 things. What is hyper awareness and what is value creation? Hyper awareness is the ability to constantly scan the environment, both the internal environment inside your company, externally, the environment, to understand opportunities, threats. How do we solve the problem that we have today, and how do we solve it for tomorrow, right? So that's hyper awareness. And it's about looking at a situation and saying, oh, I see one dot. Oh, I see another dot here. I see another dot here. These dots don't seem to be connected. And then you find dot number 4. Now I see how everything's connected, right? And this is a problem we have. We are not able to see dots in the first place. If you cannot see dots, you're not able to connect the dots. So you need to see dots first. And the only way you can see dots is if you ask questions, is if you are constantly curious, if you are looking, if you are keeping yourself aware. Why is this happening? Why did Facebook? Why is Facebook blowing up? And what's happening? With all these social media platforms. What happened in Brexit? What happened here? What happened? And as you start to see these dots, right, you start to say, "Oh, I see connections. Oh, there's an opportunity for my company. Oh, there's a threat." And then you can start to build the right skills that you need to create value to either negate the threat or to take advantage of that opportunity. And that's what hyper awareness. And the problem is that, many times, especially in my organization, I'll tell guys, why can't you see what's happening? look at all these things. We work in the learning space and the training space. I was like, training 3-4 years ago, I kept telling my team, hey, it's going to die on. Nobody wants to do training. Nobody, training is a waste of time. I wrote an article in 2016 or 17 on training being a waste of time. And people got upset. Like, look, I'm just trying to put some dots together. Why can't you just see and connect the dots? And then there's a famous author called George H. The president emeritus or chairman of Cisco, and used to be the CEO of Cisco. And he said something very interesting. He wrote a book called Connecting the Dots. And one of the things I really like, he said, while each company had its own unique circumstance, they all failed to catch one thing: a market transition. Some were so focused on winning the game they were playing, they didn't notice that a new game was starting on the next field. They did the right thing for too long. Wow, you can do the right thing for too long and fail. And that's quite interesting, right? He said that so many companies did the right thing for too long. And he said, look at Kodak, they did the right thing, put cameras. But then when digital cameras came in, they just failed to make that transition, that market transition. They couldn't connect. There's a new game. Taxi drivers were busy driving taxi and Uber was playing a new game in the next field. And they didn't see it. No, not one taxi driver created Uber. It was a non-taxi driver who created Uber, right? Likewise, if you look at all the innovations, it didn't come from the people in the industry. It came from others looking in. There's a new game starting in a new field. And if you don't start playing the new game, right, the old field starts to disappear. Right? And that's what connecting the dots. It's about being able to see stuff. And there's a famous sort of Netflix special called The Social Dilemma. And one of the things in Social Dilemma that if you watch it, they say, they say Facebook is bad, LinkedIn is bad, Instagram is bad, Twitter is bad. I mean, essentially everybody is bad, except Nicola, maybe, which is our closed platform that we have. And the thing is that when you start looking at this, that's not the intent of the movie or that whole thing. It's not that. It's not that's what the movie was saying. Because many times people say, "Oh, I'm going to get out of Facebook. I'm going to close my Facebook account. They're spying on us. They're doing this. They're doing that, and it's not safe. I need to go to a platform that is closed, that is safe, and so on and so forth, right? Like maybe a Nicole, but that's not entirely what they're saying. If you really look at the dots, what they're saying is they're saying that their business models are changing. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and all these the business models are flawed, right? Because they're advertising, they're ad-based business models, and they worked. But at some point in time, the algorithms are overcoming the individuals, and they cannot take control of what's happening. The division, the size, the division, all the disunity, and all the issues that are happening all the world is driven by these extreme things that the business model itself is drawing. And so it's not so much about it's bad, but it's about changing business. But then that's an opportunity. There's an opportunity for products like Nicole. There's an opportunity for so many other things to come into that space. And the key is for us to understand what these changing business models are. Now, the other piece about hyper-awareness and how it links ultimately to the next part, which is execution and getting value, is this. When you are hyper-aware, right, you're doing two things. You're doing a sensing, you're asking questions. I always say I tend to be the stupidest person in the room, because if you're the stupidest person in the room, you ask the most questions because you don't know anything, right? But when you're the smartest person in the room, you don't need to ask questions because you're the smartest guy who can answer you, right? So start with the mindset that you're the stupidest person in the room. Ask questions, and when you start seeing these dots, you start to capture these insights. And then when you do this and this, when you see the dots and when you capture the insights, you start going into decision making and you say, oh, I better analyze what I'm seeing. And then, get my whole team together and let's collectively understand what's happening and make a decision so that we can learn new things, we can reskill ourselves, and we can change. And we do it fast. Then we are successful. And that reskilling for itself is no use. You must reskill so that you are able to execute and be able to add value to something. If you just reskill and have skills and have so many degrees but have no value that you bring in, it's absolutely hopeless. No point. No point accumulating skills and not being able to execute. Skills must translate to execution, right? And skill translating to execution is what makes the difference. It's what makes you a high performer. It's what makes you a top talent. Having skills is no use in itself. being able to translate that skill into execution is what makes sense. Now I'm going to end, I got about a minute or so. I'll just share a little bit about my own organization in about 2 minutes. In 2008, we started as a social enterprise. We did work for kids. And as 2009, 2010, we realized we didn't have funds. So we started a business model where we said, let's do training, let's do coaching, let's do, kind of classroom-based stuff, right? And so, we became a big organization, accumulated a huge market share in Malaysia, have 300-400 different customers, and a huge market access that we had. And so it's, same business model, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, very, very progressive. But, as 2015, 2016 started to come, I at least myself, I started to look at the company and say, look, this model is great. Things are going well, but I'm looking at the dots and I'm seeing that we need to make a transition. And the transition we need to make is to use digital technology to enable ourselves to grow, right? And so I started to say, let's change and transform Leaderonomics. We need to transform into something else. And so I'm going to show you a short little video. In 2019, we made that transformation. And essentially, that transformation is essentially to move away from just a transactional company into a platform company, into an infrastructure company. So just watch this 1.5 minute video, and right after that. Oops, 1 second. Let me just get rid of my drawings. I didn't realize it's accumulated over the pages. Okay, I will just now show you the video. So I want to end by just saying that it takes time, but if we keep pushing ourselves, if we keep learning, if we keep growing, if we keep enabling ourselves to move forward, right? It took us a long time, from 2015, 16, when we started transforming our digital, and nobody believed us. At no point, everybody wants classroom. But ultimately, when COVID happened, we suddenly had a suite of platforms or systems that were hugely in demand by organizations. And the same thing, we need to always look at what are the dots out there. What are the dots? Connect those dots, figure out what we need to learn, and then go execute, add value to your life, and then make a difference in this world. I like this statement, and I'm going to end with this. A small body of determined spirit, fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission, whatever your mission may be, can alter the course of history. So wish you all the best. Have a great weekend, everyone, and all the best in your journey to reskilling yourself and going out there and adding value and making a difference to our country and to the world. All the best. Take care.